The first thing I noticed when I entered her apartment was the silence, a silence too heavy for a space that once pulsed with music, laughter, and her restless energy. The blinds were half drawn, letting in slices of pale morning light that stretched across the floor like hesitant footsteps. I shouldn't have come, I told myself. Funerals were supposed to be closure, but somehow standing there among her untouched belongings made her absence feel sharper, almost cruel. It had been only 3 days since Claire's sudden death, and already the world seemed eager to erase her presence. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe never. Her mother had handed me the keys after the service, insisting that Claire would have wanted me to keep some of her things, maybe clothes or books. Instead, what drew me deeper into the apartment wasn't nostalgia, but an unease I couldn't quite name, a sense that something was left unfinished, unsaid. The bedroom was exactly as I remembered it from countless sleepovers. Pillows tossed carelessly, the faint smell of her vanilla lotion lingering, a coffee mug with lipstick smudged along the rim abandoned on the desk. But it was the drawer, half open as if inviting me, that caught my attention. Inside, tucked between old sketch pads and faded receipts, was a leather-bound journal. I froze when I saw her handwriting scrawled across the first page. If you're reading this, it means I failed to protect you in time. My stomach twisted. The words weren't just strange, they were wrong. Claire had been dramatic, yes, but never cryptic, never prone to leaving riddles. I sat down on the edge of her bed, my hands trembling as I turned the pages. The first entries seemed ordinary enough, recounting nights out, petty frustrations, even notes about me. Always affectionate, sometimes teasing. But then the tone shifted. She wrote about jealousy that had been gnawing at her for years, about how every success I had, every moment of happiness, felt like a knife twisting deeper into her chest. Reading those words stung, each sentence unraveling the image of the friend I thought I knew. Still, something kept me from slamming the journal shut. Perhaps it was the way she balanced venom with guilt, like she was confessing rather than accusing. I hated her, but I loved her more. I wanted to ruin her, but I wanted to save her too. I whispered the lines under my breath, my voice catching, and then I read the one that made me go cold. They're watching her now. If I don't stop them, she won't survive long after I'm gone. My first thought was that she had spiraled into paranoia. Maybe grief, stress, or illness had clouded her mind in those final weeks. But then I remembered the bruises she had tried to hide, the phone calls she would silence abruptly, the nights she claimed she couldn't meet because of work, even though I knew she was unemployed. What if these weren't delusions? What if she had been trying to warn me? The next entries grew darker, more urgent. She wrote of people I didn't know by name, but who seemed to orbit my life. A man who lingered near my workplace, a woman who asked too many questions about where I lived, a shadow she claimed followed me home one night when I was too distracted to notice. Each page throbbed with obsession, but it wasn't just jealousy anymore, it was terror. She believed someone wanted to harm me, and she had taken it upon herself to intercept them. I don't know how long I can keep her safe, she scribbled in jagged lines. Every time I push them back, they find another way in. If I fall, she's next. My hands shook so violently, I nearly tore the page. I glanced around her empty bedroom, half expecting someone to step out from the corner to prove her words true. Nothing but stillness greeted me. Yet the paranoia had already lodged itself under my skin. I should have stopped reading. I should have locked the journal away and told myself it was nothing more than the ramblings of a lonely, envious friend unraveling under pressure. But my eyes kept dragging me forward, desperate for answers. The final entries weren't written like the others. They were hurried, frantic, ink blotched where tears must have fallen. They've shifted their focus. They know I'm in the way. I thought my hate would destroy her, but it's my love that will kill me. If she finds this, tell her to run. Don't look back. Trust no one, not even those closest. Especially not them. The page ended abruptly, mid-sentence, the pen stroke slashing diagonally as if ripped away from her hand. My breath came shallow, the air in the room suffocating. Run. Don't look back. Trust no one. Especially not them. Who was them? I closed the journal but couldn't release it, my fingers clenched tight around the leather cover as if it were the last tether connecting me to her. All those years I thought she was confiding in me, yet here was a whole world of fear and secrets she had kept buried. And now she was gone. Gone, or silenced. I replayed the details of her death in my mind. The police had called it an accident, a fall down the stairs in her building. She'd been alone. But Claire was never clumsy. I could still hear her laugh when I tripped in heels, how she teased that I could never match her balance. No, she wouldn't just fall. Not without help. My pulse hammered as I rose, clutching the journal. For the first time, the silence in her apartment didn't feel empty. It felt watchful. I moved toward the door, every step echoing too loudly, my nerves screaming at me to leave. But when I turned the knob, I thought I heard something, just a faint creak, like someone shifting weight on the floorboards behind me. I spun, heart in my throat, but the room remained unchanged, the blinds swaying slightly as if stirred by breath I couldn't see. That was the moment I understood, whether her warnings were real or the ravings of a fractured mind, they had already taken root. I couldn't unknow them, and someone, somewhere, might be waiting for me to find out the truth. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's frantic handwriting, those words screaming at me from the page. Trust no one, especially not them. Her journal lay on my bedside table, an anchor dragging my thoughts deeper into fear. By dawn I had convinced myself that the noise I'd heard in her apartment was nothing, maybe the building settling or my imagination. Yet the unease clung to me like a second skin, impossible to peel away. At work, I couldn't focus. The words of my colleagues blurred into a background hum, and every time the phone rang or a door creaked, I jumped. By lunch, I gave up pretending to be normal and slipped into the stairwell with the journal in hand. I needed answers. I scanned the entries again, this time searching for patterns. She mentioned dates, times, vague descriptions of people, the man outside my office, the woman with the questions, the shadows and alleys. One date caught my eye. It matched the evening I remembered losing my wallet, an inconvenience I had shrugged off at the time. Claire had written, "I kept her purse safe, but they still took something. They're testing boundaries." My throat tightened. She hadn't said a word to me about that. How could she have known? I flipped further, and another entry linked to a night I'd thought she was ignoring me. She'd written, "Couldn't risk seeing her. They were close, too close. Better she hate me than they catch her." My stomach twisted as I realized how many little moments I had dismissed. The tension in her eyes, the excuses, the way she sometimes walked me home and lingered at the door like she didn't trust the darkness. She hadn't been pushing me away. She had been trying to shield me. Still, part of me resisted. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe I was feeding into her delusions. But then, as I closed the journal, I noticed something new. On the inside of the back cover, almost invisible unless you pressed the leather flat, was an address scrawled in pencil. My hands shook as I copied it into my phone. I shouldn't go, I told myself, but the thought of ignoring it was worse. If Claire had left me breadcrumbs, I owed her enough to follow them. That evening, instead of going home, I took the train across town to a neighborhood I barely recognized. The streets narrowed into alleys, and the address led me to a rundown building with boarded windows and graffiti scrawled across the brick. It didn't look like much, yet something about it made the hairs on my neck rise. I hesitated, hovering near the entrance, when I noticed a figure smoking on the corner. He wasn't watching me, not directly, but his stance was too still, too deliberate, as if he was waiting. I pulled out my phone and pretended to scroll, then slipped inside the building before he could notice my nerves. The interior was worse. Peeling paint, the faint stench of mildew, dim light flickering from a single bulb. I almost turned back, but then I saw it. Apartment 3B, the number etched faintly into the journal's margin next to the address. The door was unlocked. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. The room was bare except for a desk shoved against the far wall, covered in papers, maps, photographs pinned together with strings of red yarn. My breath caught. On the wall above the desk were photos of me. Not just one or two, dozens. Me walking to work. Me shopping. Me leaving my apartment. In some, I was laughing with friends, oblivious to the camera. In others, I was alone, glancing down at my phone, never realizing someone was watching. My knees nearly buckled. Claire hadn't been paranoid. She had been right. I moved closer, scanning the details. Notes were scrawled beside each picture. Times, locations, patterns. Some were circled with dates in bold ink. Future dates. One of them was tomorrow. Gym, 7:15 p.m. My skin prickled. I never posted my schedule, never told anyone when I went, yet somehow they knew. And Claire, She had been in the middle of all this, trying to intercept whatever game was being played. The desk drawers yielded more horrors. Fake IDs, burner phones, even a small black notebook filled with lists of names I didn't recognize, except for one, Claire's. Her name had been crossed out in thick black lines. I stumbled back, nausea rising. The journal's warnings weren't just desperate ramblings. They were proof she had stumbled into something far darker than jealousy or betrayal. She hadn't hated me enough to destroy me. She had loved me enough to fight something I couldn't even see. A floorboard creaked behind me. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. Slowly, I turned. The man from outside stood in the doorway, cigarette now extinguished, his face unreadable in the flickering light. He didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looked amused. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said, his voice calm, almost polite. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The lock clicked. For a moment, the silence was unbearable, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs and makes breathing an effort. He leaned against the door with casual ease, as though I were an uninvited guest at his home rather than someone who had stumbled upon a nest of horrors. His eyes scanned the photos of me on the wall, then flicked back with a smirk that made my stomach lurch. "Curious," he said softly, like he was testing the weight of the word. "That's always how it starts. Curiosity. It's what killed your friend too." My throat tightened. I forced myself to stay still, though every nerve screamed to run. "Claire," I whispered, and his grin widened. Ah, yes. She thought she was clever, moving pieces on a board she didn't understand. But cleverness without power is just desperation. He stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath his boots. I stumbled back toward the desk, my hands brushing the edges of the papers and photos, desperate to find something, anything that could protect me. My fingers closed around the small black notebook I had seen earlier, and before I realized what I was doing, I held it up like a shield. His eyes narrowed. "Put that down." His tone was no longer playful but sharp, commanding. My pulse hammered as I tried to summon words. "Why were you following me? Why her? What do you want?" For the first time, the smirk faltered, and I saw something colder beneath it, a calculation that made me feel less like a person and more like a puzzle to be solved. "It's not about want," he said. "It's about inevitability. You were chosen long before she even understood the rules. Claire only delayed the outcome. That's all she ever managed, delay." He took another step, and panic surged through me. I hurled the notebook at him and bolted toward the window. He cursed as it hit his shoulder, but before he could catch me, I smashed my palm against the latch and shoved the frame open. The cold air of the night hit me as I climbed onto the ledge, but a hand clamped around my wrist like a vice. I screamed, kicking wildly, and then, suddenly, the grip loosened. Another hand had closed around his arm, yanking him back with startling force. I scrambled inside, breathless, as a figure slammed him against the wall. It was a woman, tall, sharp-eyed, her hair tied back, her movements precise as though every step had been rehearsed. She pressed a blade to his throat, and for the first time I saw fear flicker across his face. "Out," she ordered, her voice low but firm. "Now, or I finish what Claire should have." He raised his hand slowly, glaring at both of us, then slipped past her and out the door with a final hiss. "It won't matter. You can't change it." The lock clicked again, and then he was gone. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, shaking. The woman didn't lower the blade until several long seconds had passed. When she finally turned to me, her eyes softened just slightly, though her posture remained rigid. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "But then, Claire never gave you a choice, did she?" My head spun. "Who are you? How do you know her?" She crouched, resting the blade on her knee. "My name is Mara. Claire and I work together, though not in ways you'd understand at first. She thought she could protect you, thought if she bore the weight alone it would keep you safe. But you were always at the center, whether you realized it or not." My chest tightened. She said there was danger. She warned me not to trust anyone. Was she paranoid, or was she? She was right. Mara cut in, her gaze unwavering. "And now you're standing in the very storm she tried to hold back." She reached for the notebook I had thrown, flipping it open with practiced hands. Her expression darkened as she scanned the names, her jaw tightening when she reached Claire's crossed-out entry. "They've accelerated the timeline. She bought you more time, but it wasn't enough." My voice cracked. What timeline? What are they planning? Mara hesitated, then shut the notebook with a snap. You don't want to know? Not yet. But you need to understand this. They won't stop. They'll watch. They'll circle. They'll test every weakness until you break. Claire tried to face them alone, and it killed her. If you want to survive, you'll have to decide quickly whether you're willing to fight. The word fight echoed in my ears. I was no fighter. I was ordinary, clumsy, barely able to manage my own life, let alone fend off faceless threats. Yet when I looked at the wall of photos, the chilling catalog of my existence, I knew I couldn't go back to ordinary. Claire hadn't died from paranoia. She had died because she chose to resist, and now I was tangled in the same web. Why me? I whispered. What makes me so important? Mara's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I thought she might refuse to answer. But then she leaned closer, her voice a whisper like a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. Because you were never just her friend. You were the reason she fought it all. And you're the reason they're still coming. My skin went cold, my heart pounding as if it wanted to tear its way out of my chest. Before I could press for more, a crash shattered the silence. The sound of glass breaking from somewhere below. Mara's head snapped toward the door, her expression grim. They found us, she hissed. We have to move, now. The streets outside were empty, drenched in the sickly glow of streetlights that flickered as if aware of the danger hunting us. Mara and I moved in silence, the notebook heavy in my bag, each page a reminder of what Claire had left behind and what she hadn't survived. My hands shook every time they brushed the worn cover, my mind replaying the warning over and over. They won't stop. They'll test every weakness until you break. I wished for any weakness I could surrender, any fault I could confess, but my heart screamed at me to keep going. The apartment building we took refuge in was abandoned, walls scuffed and doors broken, a perfect cage for predators who waited in the shadows. Mara scanned every corner, her blade drawn, her movements deliberate and precise. They know we're here, she said quietly, and they've already adapted. Nothing we do will go unnoticed. I swallowed, nausea twisting in my stomach. Then why stay? Why not run farther? She shook her head. Running doesn't work. You're already marked. Claire's mark didn't die with her. It transferred. You carry it, whether you like it or not. Wherever you go, they follow. My breath caught in my throat. The mark. That invisible, gnawing thread I had ignored at first, thinking it was just grief or imagination. Now I knew it was a chain. Mara glanced at me, her eyes sharp, calculating. There's one way to delay them. One way to slow what's coming. But it comes with a cost you might not survive. I wanted to ask what the cost was, but before I could speak, the shadows shifted. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls, curling around my bones. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might explode. From the corner of the room, a figure emerged, not fully human, not entirely solid, a distortion of limbs and features that clawed at the edges of my sanity. Mara stepped in front of me, her blade slicing through the air, but the creature advanced undeterred, a ripple of malice moving across its amorphous form. My scream caught in my throat as it lunged, and instinctively, I threw the notebook at it. The pages burst open midair, words and sketches swirling like leaves in a storm. The figure recoiled for a second, its form flickering, but then surged forward again, faster, angrier. Mara shouted, "Run!" and dragged me toward a back staircase that smelled of mold and rot. We stumbled down, each step echoing, the hum growing louder, vibrating against my skull. My mind raced. How could something Claire feared so much, something she had tried to protect me from, be here already? And if it was here, then she hadn't died alone. She had been cornered, hunted, and I had walked straight into the same trap. We reached the basement, a damp, suffocating room filled with abandoned furniture and the smell of mildew. Mara pushed a heavy metal door shut behind us, locking it with a chain she pulled from her belt. "This won't hold for long," she said, breathing hard, her forehead glistening. "They'll find another way in. Always do. The notebook slowed them before, but now they're learning. Faster. Smarter." My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor, clutching the notebook as though it were a talisman. "Why us?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why me? I'm not special." Mara crouched beside me, her blade resting across her lap. "You are special. Claire's life, her choices, her sacrifices, They were never just about survival. She knew they'd come for the one person who mattered most to her. You. That's why they didn't take you then. But now the balance has tipped. You're in the storm she tried to hold back, and it's collapsing around you. A sudden crash of glass echoed from the far wall, and I jumped. My eyes darted toward the noise, and my stomach sank. Shadows pooled against the corners, moving independently, writhing like liquid darkness. Whispers crawled along the walls, unintelligible at first, then forming words that scraped my ears raw. You cannot hide. You cannot run. You cannot escape. The notebook pulsed in my hands, the pages flipping violently, revealing sketches I hadn't seen before, lines that formed doors, twisted hallways, figures with hollow eyes. Each illustration seemed to breathe, to pulse with intent, as though it were alive, screaming warnings I couldn't fully understand. Mara grabbed my arm, pulling me up. We need to move, she hissed. Follow me. Don't look back. We ran through the basement corridors, each turn twisting into a maze that didn't exist moments ago. Every step felt heavier, the air thickening, pressing against my chest. And then I saw them, faces. Hundreds of them, glimpsed only out of the corner of my eye, reflections in broken windows, pale shapes pressed against walls. They whispered names I recognized, but not mine. Friends, strangers, even Claire's. They were fragments of memories, trapped between reality and something else, something hungry. Stop, I screamed. Mara grabbed my shoulder, shaking me. Focus. If you break now, they take you. Not just here, but everything you are. Your life, your memory, everything becomes theirs. I blinked, trying to clear the haze, trying to find the thread of sense in the chaos. And then the wall ahead shattered, a jagged hole where concrete and brick shouldn't have been. From it poured a shape I couldn't define, taller than any human, faceless, limbs bending in impossible angles. My stomach dropped. It's them, I whispered. Mara tightened her grip on my arm. The ones Claire feared most. And they found the mark. Now it's too late to delay. Everything depends on what you do next. My mind spun. Run. Fight. Hide. I had no plan, no weapon, no hope. Only the notebook pulsing with weight, the words of a friend who had tried to warn me, and the gnawing terror that what had begun with Claire's death was far from over. The shadow raised an impossibly long arm, pointing directly at me. The whispers converged, louder, piercing, repeating a single demand. Give it to us. Give yourself. Give everything. My fingers closed around the notebook, the pages now scalding, almost alive. In that instant, clarity struck me. Not a solution, not a plan, but understanding. Claire hadn't failed because she was weak. She had failed because she faced them alone. But I wasn't alone. Mara was here. I had the notebook. And maybe, just maybe, the next move was mine to make. The shadows surged forward, the faceless figure descending like a tide of black smoke. And I knew, if I hesitated, even for a second, everything would collapse. The basement felt alive, a breathing, twisting chamber where shadows stretched beyond comprehension, their whispers curling around my mind like smoke, searing doubts and fears into every corner of thought. The notebook burned in my hands, not with fire but with a pulsating energy that made my veins thrum as if the pages themselves were a heart I could hear. Mara crouched beside me, her eyes sharp, scanning the dark as if she could slice the shadows into pieces with sheer will. Now, she said, voice trembling, whatever happens, you have to decide. They feed on hesitation. 1 second, one doubt, and it's over. Everything. I swallowed, tasting blood and fear, the metallic tang stinging my tongue. The faceless figure moved again, emerging from the fractured wall like a living void, limbs bending in impossible ways, the hum of its presence vibrating through the concrete beneath our feet. I saw the other shadows pressing in from every corner, forming a circle, a cage that I couldn't escape. What do you want from me? I shouted, though my voice was swallowed instantly by the growl of the faceless one. It didn't answer, its empty gaze fixed on me, and I felt it piercing through, weighing my memories, my choices, my very soul. Mara grabbed my arm. It's not about them. It's about you. What will you give? Everything, or nothing? I looked down at the notebook. The pages were alive with Claire's handwriting, words forming and dissolving, morphing into messages I could feel more than read. Choose who you protect. Choose who survives. Sacrifice for life or lose it all. My chest constricted. Claire's warnings, her betrayals, her desperate attempts to shield me. Had she known this was inevitable? Had she written it not for herself, but for me to finish what she couldn't? The shadows pressed closer. I could hear fragments of her laughter, twisted into whispers, the same voice I had loved now mocking me, guiding me, warning me. I gripped the notebook tighter, feeling the power surge through my fingers, a cold fire spreading up my arms. The faceless figure reached for me, a silent demand, its presence collapsing reality around me, warping space so I could barely distinguish the floor from the walls. And then, instinct, pure and unreasoning, took over. I opened the notebook fully, letting the pages fall across the concrete, forming a barrier of words, sketches, names. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing like a forest fire being held back by wet earth. Mara's eyes widened. It's working, but only for a moment. You have to act. I realized then that the notebook wasn't just a record of Claire's life. It was a conduit, a tether between her and me, between life and the dark that hunted us. I had to use it, but the cost was clear. Some part of me would remain with the shadows, and perhaps some part of me would never return. The faceless figure surged forward again, faster, angrier, limbs twisting in impossible angles. I stepped forward, heart hammering, the notebook raised like a shield, my voice trembling as I shouted Claire's name, calling into the void the one connection that had survived her death. The words became louder, forming a chant, a rhythm that pulsed with the notebook's energy, and I felt the shadows faltering, the faceless one halting mid-lunge. Mara shouted, urging me on, but the whispers now turned personal, clawing at my mind with visions of loss, of betrayal, of everything I had ever feared. Give it. Give yourself. Give all you have. I felt it inside me, a tug at my very soul, and my hands ached as if the notebook were demanding more than I could bear. And then I understood. Claire hadn't just warned me. She had built the choice into the notebook itself. I could fight and survive, but only if I gave something permanent in return. I had to sacrifice a part of myself to lock the shadows away, to protect life beyond the basement. I swallowed, tears streaking my cheeks, and made the decision. I placed my hand flat on the notebook, feeling the paper burn lightly into my skin, ink bleeding into flesh. I whispered an apology I hoped she could hear, a promise I hoped the shadows would respect, and I let the energy surge through me. The faceless figure screamed, not a sound from any human throat, but a vibration of pure malice, and I felt a part of myself tearing free, absorbed into the notebook, binding the shadows in place. Mara cried out, "Hold on," and I did, feeling my consciousness stretch, twist, fragment, but also tether to the light, to Claire, to the chance at life outside the cage. The shadows writhed violently, clawing at the barrier I had created, but each motion was slower, weaker, as if the notebook's pages now carried weight beyond my imagination. The faceless one tried to reach me one last time, its limbs stretching impossibly long, voiceless rage filling the air, but the words from the notebook formed a final wall, a lattice of ink and intent. And then, silence. The air fell still. The shadows shrank into nothingness, drawn into the notebook's pages, trapped in a prison I had created at the cost of my own essence. I sank to the floor, gasping, my vision blurred, the notebook now inert, blank, its energy spent. Mara dropped beside me, her hand gripping mine, eyes wide and wet. "You did it," she whispered. "It's over." I nodded, though a hollow weight filled me. The shadows were gone, yes, but part of me had gone with them, a piece of my soul tethered to Claire's warnings, to the notebook, to the endless vigilance required to prevent their return. I looked at Mara. "It's not really over," I said softly. "Not forever. They'll try again. And if I falter, if I forget, it all comes back." She nodded grimly, pulling me up. "Then we remember. We stay vigilant. And we move forward. Together." I looked down at the notebook, its pages blank now, holding nothing but memory and the echoes of Claire's voice. A strange warmth spread through me, not relief, but understanding. I had faced the culmination of her warnings, survived the impossible, and yet, I knew that the choice had left a mark. Not visible, not tangible, but etched into my very being. A silent promise that vigilance and courage could hold darkness at bay, but the cost would never truly vanish. And in that moment, as we climbed the stairs out of the basement and into a world that seemed impossibly bright after the darkness, I realized the final truth. Survival was not the reward. It was the responsibility. And I would carry it, for Claire, for myself, for anyone who might fall into shadows unprepared, knowing the notebook had chosen me as the next keeper, and that keeping it safe meant facing every shadow yet to come. The morning sun seeped through the curtains, spilling golden light across the living room where shadows had once writhed and whispered. I sat on the edge of the sofa, hands trembling, the notebook resting inert on the coffee table. Its pages remained blank, but the weight of everything it had carried, the lives, the warnings, the darkness, pressed against my chest as though my heartbeat alone could keep the memories alive. Mara sat across from me, quiet, her expression tight with exhaustion and relief, but I could see the strain that mirrored my own, the knowledge that what we had endured would haunt us long after the shadows were bound. I ran my fingers over the notebook's cover, half expecting it to pulse, to shiver, to demand my attention again, but it remained still. The basement, the whispers, the faceless figure, they were gone, locked away in the lattice of ink and intent I had created. And yet, a part of me knew that even bound, they existed, waiting for moments of weakness, cracks in vigilance, small openings where they might seep back into reality. I swallowed hard, trying to reconcile relief with dread. Surviving had not erased the cost. My thoughts drifted to Claire. Her handwriting, her secrets, her warnings, they had guided me through horrors I could never have imagined, and yet she had paid her own price, her voice reaching from beyond the grave to ensure I understood the choice I was making. I traced my fingers over the coffee table, the faint heat from the previous night's ordeal lingering like a phantom. Every second since binding the shadows had been a quiet test, a question posed by the world and by the notebook. Would I falter? Would I forget? Could I continue carrying the responsibility I had claimed? Mara broke the silence. You did more than survive, she said softly. You contained it. You saved lives, probably countless lives you'll never even know. I nodded, but the ache in my chest deepened. I saved them, yes, but at what cost? Part of me stayed with it, Mara. Part of me will never come back, and I can feel it. It's like a shadow beneath my own shadow. She reached across, clasping my hand, grounding me. Then we live with it. We honor it. That's all anyone can do. The shadows exist, yes, but so do we. We choose vigilance over despair. I exhaled, a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, and looked around the room, seeing everything in a new light. The furniture, the photographs, the empty spaces where shadows had lurked, they were ordinary again, but the memory of the darkness was anything but. It had etched itself into my consciousness, a permanent mark of experience and sacrifice. Slowly, I opened the notebook once more, half expecting to see the faceless figure emerging, the shadows twisting across the pages, whispering their demands. But the pages remained blank, serene, a vessel emptied yet full of potential. The ink that had bound darkness now slept, dormant but alive in the silent void between lines. And yet, I could feel it calling, faintly, like a pulse beneath the skin. The responsibility, the vigilance, had not vanished. The notebook had chosen me, and though the shadows were confined, their existence demanded awareness. I closed it gently, placing it back on the coffee table as if tucking a fragile life into the world, aware that it would always be more than paper. It was a tether, a warning, a legacy of choices I could never abandon. Days passed in a surreal blur. The world outside seemed impossibly bright, birdsong and traffic and casual laughter a stark contrast to the nightmares of the basement. I tried to resume routine, to live as if the horrors were stories confined to the pages of the notebook. But at night, I would feel the subtle tug of the shadows, the faint vibration beneath my skin, the reminder that the boundary I had created was maintained only by my awareness, by my willingness to remember. Mara remained by my side, a partner in vigilance and memory, her presence a balm to the isolation that came from carrying a secret so immense that it could not be shared with the wider world. We spoke little of what had occurred, for words were insufficient, and any explanation would invite skepticism, disbelief, or worse, the attention of those who would seek to exploit the power of the notebook. And yet, in quiet moments, our eyes met and we understood. We had faced the abyss together, and we had survived, not unscathed, not unmarked, but alive and tethered to a choice that was ours to uphold. I began to notice small signs that reminded me of Claire. A folded paper tucked between a book in Mara's hand, the fleeting scent of ink and faint lavender that seemed to trail in the air, the way a shadow shifted unnaturally in a quiet corner. They were not the faceless ones returning. Not yet. They were echoes, reminders, signals that vigilance was perpetual. And I welcomed them, paradoxically, because they were proof that Claire's guidance had endured, that her choice to leave the warnings, to build the notebook as a barrier, had extended beyond her own life into mine, into our shared responsibility. One evening, Mara and I returned to the basement, not to confront the shadows, but to inspect the lattice of ink and pages, to ensure the structure held. The air was still, cool, almost comforting in its neutrality. The shadows no longer writhed, no longer whispered, but the notebook rested in the center, a sentinel in its own right. I touched it lightly, and for the briefest moment, I felt a connection to Claire, a surge of warmth and understanding that transcended mortality. She had given me a gift beyond comprehension, a guide, a weapon, and a moral compass, all embedded in fragile pages of paper and ink. And as I rose, the basement seemed less a place of horror and more a testament to endurance, to choice, to the capacity of the human spirit to confront darkness and emerge changed but unbroken. I knew then that life would demand more. Challenges beyond shadows, moral tests that would echo the dilemmas Claire had faced, but I was no longer afraid. I had inherited not just the notebook, but the courage it symbolized, the awareness that survival alone was insufficient without the willingness to act, to remember, to protect. As we ascended the stairs, leaving the basement and the silence behind, I realized that the story was not ending. It was continuing, threaded through memory, action, and vigilance. The notebook's blank pages held no power until choice met courage, until understanding met responsibility. And I understood finally, fully, that the shadows were only ever dormant, their potential for menace contained by those who dared to remember. I placed a hand on the notebook one last time, feeling its cool, inert weight, and whispered a promise. I would not forget. I would not falter. The faceless figure might never speak again, and the shadows might never rise, but if they did, I would be ready. Claire's legacy lived in me, in Mara, in the choices we made, in the vigilance we maintained. And though the cost had been high, the moral clarity was profound. Surviving darkness was not enough. Embracing responsibility, confronting fear, protecting others, these were the true victories. The notebook, blank now, was more alive than ever, a constant reminder that the story did not end in the basement, nor with Claire's death, nor even with my confrontation. It extended outward, threaded into every choice, every shadow noticed, and every whisper ignored. And in the quiet aftermath, as sunlight filled the room and the world outside continued oblivious to the horrors contained within a few fragile pages, I felt a strange peace. Not relief, not triumph, but understanding. Survival had been the beginning. Vigilance was the reward. And responsibility, the weight, the tether, the living legacy of Claire's choices, was forever mine to bear.